I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime, and this is Currents.
What's on your plate? Today's holiday, perhaps?
We introduced a bill for, is it right here, Catholic War Veterans of America.
Catholicism and country, what it means today.
The very best description of patriotism from a Christian perspective is my country, right or wrong.
And we go into the deep to get Bishop DiMarzio's thoughts on veterans.
It's a historic tradition in our country to recognize the sacrifices of our veterans.
Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us here on this Veterans Day. It's a day when we honor all the men and women who've served in the U.S. Armed Forces.
I know your dad has, for sure.
That's right.
Well, honoring them takes many forms, from memorial sites to ceremonies, and in what seems to be growing in popularity, also in license plates. But one group of war veterans says they're being deprived of that last honor. It's the Catholic War Veterans, and now there's an effort underway to change it.
Baby, you can drive my car, and baby, I love you. Beep, 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 yeah.
The inspiration to introduce the bill came from a constituent of mine and a number of his friends while I was at a senior center last year, telling me that there was no license plate for Catholic War Veterans, which I wasn't aware of at the time. And I went to do some research and found out that was a true statement. So I introduced legislation to have a plate made. And I went through looking through all the other plates and noticed there were plates for other veterans and other things. So we introduced a bill for, is it right here, Catholic War Veterans of America, you know, to give them some recognition of the service they have done.
I happen to be a Catholic War veteran. That makes me a veteran and also a Catholic. And I think it's only appropriate that we have an organization, the Catholic War Veterans, that we have a plate named for them.
Both the chairman of the committee and the acting commissioner of transportation had told me there was a moratorium on doing any new license plates because of some litigation going on. And my argument was that this is not a new license plate. It's just a variation of a plate, plates that they already have out there.
I think every veterans organization should have their own license plate. They're proud to have served, and they want to show that their service was appreciated. And we want to display that to all the people in the state of New York and around the country.
When we talk about what my opinion is of Catholic War Veterans, I think they made a great contribution to our country and to society as a whole. They fought in all the wars we've had with great distinction, and I thought this would be a way of giving, some gratitude to the men and women who did serve in the armed services.
I think it's very appropriate that the Catholic War Veterans, along with other veteran organizations, get the recognition in a license plate that they deserve.
Beep, 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 yeah.
Let's see how this would look to show recognition for the men and women who did serve in our armed forces. I think this would stand out and give the public an idea of the person driving the vehicle had made a sacrifice for our country, and this is a deserving way of showing it to them. And hopefully someday soon we'll see this on a number of plates in New York State.
Well, we also reached out to the chairman of the Assembly's Transportation Committee, but he did not return our calls.
Stay tuned. There's much more current straight ahead. He was permanently blinded during the Iraq War. We'll hear one soldier's story of faith. Welcome back to this Veterans Day edition of Currents. Our next story is about a soldier living with what he calls unseen hope. His name is Captain Scott Smiley. In 2005, he was seriously wounded by a suicide bomber in Iraq, an attack that left this husband and father of two blind. He is now the Army's first ever active duty blind officer serving at West Point.
Last year, I had a chance to speak with Scott Smiley by phone and hear how his faith and his family sustained him during one of the hardest times of his life. Here again is that interview. Well, Scotty Smiley, captain in the U.S. Army, thank you so much for taking some time to be with us today here on Currents. We appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me.
Well, I understand that this your life kind of changed a little bit in 2005. Tell me about that. I understand that you actually were supposed to leave Iraq before this happened, but you ended up staying about a month longer than you had originally planned.
Correct, Matt. I was infantry soldier posted at Fort Lewis, Washington, and was deployed to Mosul, Iraq. And in April of 2005, our unit was coming over under heavy contact. And on April 5th, one of our companies was hit by a suicide car bomb, and a soldier was severely injured. And on April 6th, like you said, I was actually scheduled to go on my rest and relaxation period on April 2nd, but I was let known on March 31st, so I only had a couple days to let my wife know and prepare everything, so I decided to hold off and actually leave on April 22nd, almost a month later, to where it could give me some more time to prep and prepare everything. And on April 6th, as I was out in the city with my company commander, we had intelligence on the ground that the terrorists were trying to set up some type of ambush. And as I was traveling on the rural roads, trying to stay off the large highways and interstates in Iraq, in Mosul, I actually came upon a vehicle which was somewhat suspicious. And as I realized the rules of engagement and who we're supposed to shoot and when we're supposed to shoot,
Right.
none of those came into play. And so I yelled at the man to get out of his car. No one was around him. I think everyone knew kind of he was a danger or a threat, and he began pulling a little away from me. So I shot around by his vehicle just to let him know I'm talking to him, and he stopped his car and stared at me and raised his hands up like nothing was wrong. And then he began pulling away. I shot one more round, and then everything in my life went black.
Wow. What's the first thing that you remember happening after that?
The first thing I consciously remember happening was my father giving me a kiss goodbye after he had been with me a week in the Walter Reed Army Medical Center, the hospital in Washington, D.C. So during that time, about a week and a half to 2 weeks had passed, and during that time, I had had first aid applied to me directly after the suicide car bomb blew up, and then was flown down to Balad, Iraq, where I underwent massive surgery, was then flown to Germany and then to Walter Reed, where my wife, Tiffany, met me and prayed with me and was there by my side along with my parents and my brothers and sisters.
Right. Well, and then, of course, obviously the doctors were telling you that you weren't going to be able to see again. What was your initial reaction, and how did that maybe change after you kind of received that news?
Well, I really had I really had a love for the Army and what we were doing overseas, and obviously when you've had such a devastating injury occur, at the time I was completely blind. There was still hope for my right eye as they hadn't done surgery, but then after 2 weeks after the injury, they did surgery, and the doctor came in and let me know that there was nothing that they could have done, and I would be blind the rest of my life. I really started questioning the Army, what I did over there, and then who I was as a person, and unfortunately kind of went into depression and really questioned not only what I was doing and why I did it, but questioned God. And it was really sad, now that I looking back at my life, it was sad to see me go through it, but at the same time it's something that many soldiers have to go through on a daily basis, just questioning what they're doing and why they've done what they've done. And in the end, it was my wife's love, my family support, prayer, reading the Bible, friends coming in and playing songs that really allowed me to refocus back on God and understand what I did was the correct thing to do, and to still have faith in God, but then trust my wife, my family, and still continue to serve in the Army.
Right. Now, I was reading as I was preparing for this interview an article that said that you were inspired by the statement of St. Paul, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." And I find that interesting because obviously St. Paul, who before was Saul, was someone who was blinded as well, and there seems to be quite a parallel there.
There is, Matt, and it's amazing how, St. Paul's words in the New Testament and how he came to that decision, and in questioning what his purpose is in this world is, and as I did that also, but understanding that that we're here to glorify God, and that's our sole purpose, and whether Paul knew it or not, and for myself, is without eyesight, there's still no reason I can't glorify and praise God and just thank Him for the love that He's given me. And Philippians 4:13 is actually inscribed in my West Point ring. Wow. And I graduated 6 years ago in 2003, and it's something that I always held dear to me. And as a result, it was something I questioned in the hospital. But again, God was always, is always there and stood by my side.
Right. Now, I understand really quickly here, you're working on a book.
I am.
Tell me a little about that.
It's a good friend of mine, Doug Crandall, and I are writing kind of a memoir about my life. It's an exciting, inspirational, riveting book, and the title is Hope Unseen. It's an amazing story about my life, and kind of goes through a lot of the things that we've talked about today. But it's just again shows that anyone can do all things through Christ who strengthens them.
Right. Well, very good. Well, Captain Scott Smiley, thank you so much for being here, and for being here on the phone anyway, and for sharing your story with us. It truly is amazing. All the best, sir, to you and to your family as well, and God bless.
Thanks, Matt. You too. God bless.
Well, Scott Smiley's book, Hope Unseen, was published earlier this year. You can get that, I'm sure, in the bookstores, maybe on Amazon as well. Go ahead and search for that. It, I'm sure, is, as he says, very riveting and inspirational, because he has been through a lot. And I love that parallel that he draws between, himself and St. Paul with the blindness. And there really is a big parallel there, and that's just a struggle that he has gone through. Talking about, I don't want to seem to make light of it or anything like that with this illustration, but making, taking lemons and making lemonade, that thing. He's really taken a bad thing and made it something that he's using to inspire others.
Right, and metaphorically, I think that a lot of people, even though they may have their actualized sight, may be blind to things that perhaps God may be trying to teach them or show them, or the world may be trying to, enlighten them to. And in that regard, we all have our own sort of obstacles and things to get over, and also things to be grateful for. And I think that probably the message at the core of this book, at a certain level, is gratitude for all of the good things that he does in fact have, even though his eyesight is no longer with him.
That's right.
Well, stay with us. We will be right back.
Just ahead, beer was not the only thing on tap at one Queens bar. We'll hear about what patriotism means to today's Catholics.
Veterans lay down their lives for their country, right? They basically put everything on the line for us.
Welcome back. Veterans Day, of course, is a time for honoring those in uniform who have served our country. Like I said, like your dad did. Right. They have often risked their lives for the freedoms that we so enjoy, so it naturally stirs up some feelings of patriotism. Indeed. Well, patriotism was the timely theme of a recent Theology on Tap held in Queens. And the speaker was a figure that's familiar to many here on the net, the Vicar of Communications, Monsignor Kieran Harrington.
What is patriotism? The very best description of patriotism from a Christian perspective is my country, right or wrong. If right, to be kept right. And if wrong, to be set right. We may feel the sentimentality of standing at attention when the Star-Spangled Banner is being played. But if we're not willing to stand up and support what we think is right, and oppose what we think is wrong, that sentimentality, that patriotism is not real. It's a lack of courage. If I am a Catholic and I am a patriot, what it requires really is my going into the world to transform our society, to make our country better.
I consider myself a patriot. Well, it's my country. Unfortunately, I don't like the way this country is going. I mean, I consider myself a conservative. I see a lot of the values that are being bestowed upon us just eroding away, and I try to fight back.
I tend to be pro-peace. I tend to be anti-war. I tend to have a generous attitude toward the economy. I believe in universal health care. And I believe that the life issue in terms of abortion and so forth has a higher weight. But on the other hand, I have voted for politicians really solely on that issue, and I feel very disturbed about that. I would like to go and vote for a candidate who I actually believe in. It would be refreshing.
It's hard sometimes being a Catholic, especially in New York, especially in New York City. We deal with a lot of controversy because of our stances, but it's important that we, as young Catholics, stand up for what the Church teaches.
You might get it wrong. I don't deny that. I get it wrong a lot of times. But our participation in the process, our participation in the life of our society, is what's going to transform our society and make our society better.
I thought the priest was very direct and challenging and not afraid to just say, you know, to challenge.
Think about the men and women who serve in the armed forces. I think that what they stand for is that their life is not ultimately the most important thing. They really are models of how we are called to live our lives. Veterans lay down their lives for their country, right? They basically put everything on the line for us. And as a result of that, they model for each of us what we are called to do as Christians, not to lay down our life for our country, but to lay down our life for our brothers and sisters because of Christ's command.
Good analogy.
Yeah, and you saw there kind of the full range of or the full spectrum, I should say, of different, beliefs on, political issues, and the struggle that a lot of people, go through with trying to reconcile maybe what they believe and the people that they vote for and that kind of thing, or whatever party they want to align themselves with their candidates in elections. You saw a lot of that. We talked about a lot of that before this past election. It was really, a hot topic of discussion, trying to reconcile those two things, your faith and your politics.
It's true, and there's a lot of apathy in general, and sometimes, it's not cool to sort of stand up for whatever it is that you do in fact believe in, but certainly, there is a lot of sacrifice involved with serving in the armed forces, and as Monsignor Harrington was saying, to sort of use that perhaps as an example about the sacrifices that we can make in our own lives for our fellow man, and how that can play out in a non, sort of military arena, but just in a regular, everyday kind of a way. Yeah. Well, we will be back with more of our special Veterans Day edition of Currents in just a moment.
When we return, we go into the deep on this Veterans Day.
It's more difficult today to understand what the military is about, since the conflicts that we are in now are not so clear-cut to most people.
Well, finally tonight we want to bring you again a few thoughts from Bishop DiMarzio on veterans and Veterans Day. We first broadcast this interview last week anticipating the holiday, but we thought it was worth a second airing.
When I spoke with him, the bishop shared some personal insights about service to our country, along with some remembrances of veterans that he has known as we went into the deep. Bishop DiMarzio, thanks again for joining us on Currents.
Always good to be here.
It's a pleasure to see you. Veterans Day, what are your thoughts about Veterans Day and the contributions that American veterans have made?
Well, clearly it's a historic tradition in our country to recognize the sacrifices of our veterans, some of whom paid the ultimate price, others who were sacrificed to defend our country. And I think it's more difficult today to understand what the military is about, since the conflicts that we are in now are not so clear-cut to most people. Why are we doing this? Should we be there? Whereas in the Second World War and the Korean War, it seemed a lot clearer. Vietnam probably put some doubt in people's mind. But I think today, when we're talking about Afghanistan and Iraq, people wonder. And I think that's taken away from some of the honor that we must give the veterans for what they do.
So we can certainly remember the folks that are currently serving and that have just recently served as well. We know that there's a shortage of priests, and one of the ripple effects of that is that there's a shortage of military chaplains as well. What can be said or done about that?
Well, clearly there is a shortage in the military, and any priest, for example, in our diocese that has expressed a desire to serve in the military, I've been happy to let them, be part of it. We're also participating in a program which is a joint program with the military archdiocese. The archdiocese cannot ordain priests for themselves, but they have to accept priests from other dioceses on loan for a particular period of time, since it would be impossible for them to guarantee someone staying in the service, because that's basically what they supply is military chaplains. So we're in a program where a seminarian is in a kind of a joint sponsorship where they can come and study with us, giving us at least 5 years of service, and then they will be released to the military, and then someday they could come back to the diocese. So that's a new program in the last 10 years that's been developed, and we're participating in it as a diocese. And as I say, anyone who does have a desire to serve either in a reserve capacity or full-time, we're very happy to be able to help them help the military is what it's about.
Right. Yeah, to work with
Sure.
On that endeavor. And along those lines, what are some of the resources that the Catholic Church in the Diocese of Brooklyn offers to veterans?
Well, we do have Catholic War Veterans. It's a private organization, but they are really a part of it. I know we have programs in Catholic Charities that are designed to help veterans. So there is some support services available. Thank God New York City, I think, has a lot of resources, some private, some public, for veterans. So it is a good situation for most people. At least they need help, they can find it somewhere.
Sure. And earlier you were speaking a little bit about World War II, the Korean War, some of these other wars, in history. Do you have any personal experiences with people you've worked with that either from then or from now, the people you've served?
Well, the Second World War, I was just a baby. But the Korean War, I remember very well. My godfather was serving and, writing letters to him. He would send us, some trinkets, a jacket or so. So it became alive, and then television was starting then pretty good, and you would see the conflict. So it was something you would not forget, and it was a personal involvement, through someone that was close to us.
And certainly can always pray for folks
Sure,
that are
right,
serving
exactly.
abroad, obviously, because can never have too many of those. Bishop DiMarzio on Veterans Day, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
Always have to fun to have the bishop in the studio.
Absolutely. Well, and he was talking about seeing, the conflict on TV and all of that. I remember growing up and seeing the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, on TV. And I mean, it was really kind of the first conflict where, they had the embedded reporters and everything, out there in the battle zone. And it was just remarkable to see that. And of course, now we're very familiar with that with Iraq and Afghanistan. I think we've seen a lot more war than maybe we have in the past, just as the general public.
Right, yeah, definitely. And it's one of the things that can keep folks that are serving in the military in our thoughts and prayers a little bit more frequently, because sometimes when it's not on our own soil, there may be more of a tendency to, not have that be in, the front and center part of our brains all the time. But certainly Veterans Day is a time to remember everybody that is making those sacrifices for all of us.
Absolutely. And happy Veterans Day to my dad, who is a veteran of the Air Force and served during Vietnam. So just wanted to say that. We mentioned him a couple of times, but wanted to say that.
No, it's great. That is it for tonight. Okay, that's the end of our Veterans Day special.
I caught her off guard.
He did, but that's great. I want to just say, congrats to Dad, too, and happy Veterans Day. Okay.
Thank you.
Remember, you can always find us online at currentsny.net. Be sure to check us out on Facebook and on Twitter as well. And until next time, I'm Francesca Maxime.
I threw everything off kilter here. I'm Matt McClure. Have a great night and a great holiday.